Bolter Brewing is a company that was founded in Australia by 6 Australians and 1 American in March 2016. The founders are all quite heavily involved in the surfing circuit, leaning heavily on the founders' brand. These founders include Mick Fanning, Joel Parkinson, Bede Goodridge, and Josh Kerr. In the short time it has been running, it has gained significant traction in the Australian market, focusing primarily on its strong branding, ambassadors, and high-quality product. It is a brand founded on both Australia's and the founders' perceived light-hearted nature and Australian values. The key capabilities. Bolter Brewing has multiple key capabilities. These include world-famous founders. Mick Fanning and friends are world-famous surfers, known in most surf locations around the world. Mick Fanning's fame is so great that at one point, according to Google, Mick Fanning, post-Shark fight, was searched more than Barack Obama. Award-winning beer and brewer. It always helps when you run a beer production company that customers and critics enjoy the product. Since its founding in 2016, Bolter Brewing has won over 20 awards, including the Best International Pale Ale in 2017 and the Best Australian Brewery in 2018. Positive team environment. When they initially started, one of the business partners was quoted as saying, "When we started, we put everything else aside. We knew we were here to work with Bolter." They are very adaptable and have personal knowledge of the specific surf market. Due to the size of Bolter, they have the ability to adapt and transform to suit the market. Coupled with the knowledge that the world-famous founders have of global surf locations and cultures, they are very well suited. Bolter is looking at entering the Japanese market, initially focusing on the coastal surf locations before spreading to the greater market. We are looking at this market in particular, the surfing locations, as it has the potential to get global exposure at the Tokyo Olympic Games, where they are offering surfing as a medal event for the first ever time. These towns are expecting a surge in tourism after the Olympic Games, with one surf town, pre-Olympic Games, Ichinomiya, attracting 300,000 surfers in 2017, up 100,000 from the previous year. This is a significant market that looks like it is going to continue growing, especially after the upcoming Olympics. Using the strong brand and legendary founders, Bolter will be able to work with coastal bars to ensure that Bolter is offered during these periods. Environmental and customer analysis. An environmental analysis was conducted to understand the viability of penetrating the Japanese market. Political, economic, social, technological, legal, and environmental factors were evaluated for this section. Political. Australia and Japan have a free trade agreement, meaning that Bolter can easily enter the market, assuming it can find vendors willing to sell the product. Japan has no restriction on beer imports, which is a massive positive for Bolter. The taxation is similar to that in Australia, and as a result of the free trade agreement, should not give Bolter any grief. Economic. Japan is the world's third largest global economy and has high levels of disposable income. A potential risk here is that the Australian dollar decreases in value, resulting in Bolter having to either increase prices or pull out of the market to remain viable. Social. Japan has a strong drinking culture, with an increase in tourism and a trend towards craft beers. All of these are massive positives for Bolter, assuming that the marketing efforts are translated to fit the Japanese culture and language. Technological. Japan is one of the most technologically savvy countries in the world, recently voted #1 in the top 10 countries for technological expertise. Bolter will need to make sure that they have the correct supply chains in place and that they have the marketing set up to utilize these technologies. Legal. According to Austrade, Japan is very specific regarding labeling and packaging. Bolter will need to make sure that they are within the legal guidelines before attempting to enter the market. Environmental. Environmental is a big factor when considering the sustainability of exports and logistics compared to environmental concerns. This is very important as the target market are traditionally environmentally conscious and respond positively to environmentally ethical companies. Another problem that can arise with this is trouble with increase in demand as seen in 2012 when there was a shortage of barley and beer prices increased significantly. Market. The entire Japanese beer market is estimated to be worth 29 billion US dollars per year, with the craft beer recording an estimated 2% of this market share. When compared to the Australian market of $2.7 billion US per year, it is a highly lucrative market. The beer market as a whole has been decreasing in Japan, with a 0.8% drop in 2016 alone. This is not a reason to fear entering the market though, as in that period, the craft beer industry grew by 1%. When you compare it to over a decade, the craft beer industry has fought the steady decrease of regular beer sales with an increase of 400% over the past decade. This is evidence of the current market trends, which include an increase in craft consumption and market share, despite the decreasing beer market. The Japanese market is trending towards Western beers because of the positive image of Western culture amongst the Japanese. At present, there are Western companies attempting to enter the market to take advantage of this trend, with big Japanese companies purchasing Australian brewers to take to market in Japan. For the purposes of this proposal, the target market has been broken down into two stages. The first stage will focus on coastal towns who are more likely to know of and respond positively to Bolter Brewing Company and their marketing messages. These areas are the Kanto area, Shikoku, Okinawa, and Kansai. By targeting coastal towns, Bolter will be placing their marketing messages in front of people who are likely to buy the product and agree with the Bolter brand. The ideal customer demographic will be similar to those who are currently targeted in Australia, as they are heavily involved in social media, respond positively to marketing, and will likely have shared interests with the Bolter brand. A target market persona was created to show an example of a typical Japanese Bolter drinker. This is an ideal customer, as not only does he have low price sensitivity and a high disposable income, but will likely, through word of mouth, spread the word of Bolter to his friends. After breaking into the target market on the coast, the second rollout will focus on attracting clients in the big cities, such as Tokyo and Osaka, to name a few. There are currently 4 key Western craft brewers in the Japanese market, which are Wild Jack, James Squire, Sierra Nevada, and Little Creatures. They are primarily owned by the big companies, such as Asahi and Kirin. As they rely heavily on Western undertones in their marketing, these have been picked as the key competitors. Porter's 5 forces were used to gain a greater understanding of the competition in the potential new market. Rivalry among existing competition. There are lots of competitors, but they all seem to be growing and prospering in the craft industry. A potential issue in the future may arise due to regular beer companies shifting their business model to suit the craft industry. Threat of substitution. There is a significant number of craft beers on the market in Japan, and this looks like it will continue growing. A focus on developing consumer-based brand equity will need to be made to ensure that the customers remain loyal. Supplier power. This is not much of a threat as Bolter currently gets its ingredients from an Australian supplier. This could, however, become an issue if opening a brewery in Japan and relying on local produce. Buyer power. There is a high disposable income in Japan and low price sensitivity towards craft beers. Threats of new entry. Due to free trade agreements and the threat of new entry is high from Australia and other Western countries. By focusing on strong branding, Bolter can try and combat this and position themselves ahead of the competition. The key competitors are Little Creatures and Sierra Nevada. The competitive advantages of Bolter include the founder's success, leveraging this recognition and the fact that they are adaptable. Strengths and weaknesses. The founder's brand, award-winning beer and brewer, good committed team behind the brand, and very adaptable. Weaknesses. They don't have the resources of huge craft beer companies. They have a more expensive product. The lack of distributors in Japan could restrict exporting and late market entry. Opportunities. Getting the product in front of the world at the Olympics, taking advantage of the growing market in Japan. New market means completely customize the rollout and increase the size and share of Bolter worldwide. Threats. Threats include the exchange rate changing, relationship breakdowns damaging trade agreements, new competitors entering the market, and trends changing away from craft beer.